Good evening, honorable members, our beautiful Madam Speaker, members of the House. It is an absolute pleasure to stand before you this evening and give the State of Civil Society address. Now, civil society has in many ways been overlooked and undermined, despite it being the backbone of many thriving societies, including our own. It is civil society that ensures that there are mentorship programs for young people who live in communities where there are no accessible role models. It is civil society that has ongoing feeding schemes ensuring that learners do not have to learn on an empty stomach. It is civil society that continues to fight the good fight against gender-based violence when those stories no longer feature on our news cycles and when our allies have gotten tired. Now, civil society is the third sector of society, separate from government, separate from the private sector. It includes all institutions and organizations that are fully focused on addressing our socioeconomic and socio-political challenges. But most importantly, it includes institutions that uphold our democracy and hold government to account. In many ways, decades ago, it is civil society organizations that continue to address pressing socioeconomic challenges for people of color when liberation was still being fought for. So with that said, it is an absolute shame that little, actually negligible investment has been made into sustaining, growing, and innovating the civil society sector, a sector that is full of potential with a track record of good work. There are several issues plaguing the sector, rendering it increasingly ineffective and increasingly void of impact, and I'll go through a few of them. The first is that there's no institutional support for civil society organizations, and this includes non-profits, foundations, charities, trusts, you name it. Organizations that do impactful work, uplift communities, there's no institutional support. Now, there's no institution that fights for the betterment of civil society organizations, or one that creates policies that allow ease of doing business for these organizations. There were over 266,000 registered nonprofits in 2022, up from 248,000 the previous year, up from 228,000 the year before that. Yet there's no home for this ever-increasing number of organizations. As a result of this, there's no institutional cohesion within the space, making it painfully difficult, nearly impossible really, for civil society organizations to collaborate. And this is a disaster, in my opinion, for a sector that thrives on collaboration and joint efforts. Now, the lack of institutional support has made it even more challenging because the act of registering a nonprofit is a nightmare. Talk less of other legalities. The second challenge is the dream that we have been sold, that only for-profit entities can improve our economy. As a result, civil society organizations are forced to shift their focus from solely being about impact to impact with a profit. And you might fight me on this, but I guarantee you that 9 times out of 10, that for-profit motive will take precedence over that impact motive. And what we have left on the other end are people with real needs and real challenges that aren't being met at the root. The third challenge is the lack of meaningful youth participation and representation in civil society. Civil society leadership is one predominantly male, and we'll touch on that at some point here, but also it has very little youth representation. And for us as young people, our developmental agenda is being developed by people with no contextual understanding of our lived experiences. And so, despite this very bleak picture, the optimist in me still chooses to believe that there's hope. Hope for a civil society sector that is thriving and that is impactful. And I believe that the civil society sector of tomorrow can look a little bit like this. It can look like micro grants for smaller civil society organizations with less stringent requirements than normal grants, making it easier for these organizations to demonstrate their impact and unlock funding for even more impact to be made in future. The civil society sector of tomorrow looks like one that has less red tape for these organizations to register and gain public benefit organization status. It looks like a registration process that is efficient, one that is easy, and at the very least does not take 2 years. It also looks like more capacity building for these non-profit organizations, ensuring that they are equipped with the tools that they need to scale their work. The civil society sector of tomorrow looks like increased cohesion in the space, where these organizations know who's who, who's doing what, and have spaces where they can connect and collaborate. The civil society sector of tomorrow is one that is a viable employment prospect for young people, where they're able to see that impactful work is real work, dignified work, and meaningful work. It also looks like more innovation through technology to scale impact, reach people at scale, and also change the face of what non-profit programming can really look like. And so in my view, the civil society sector of tomorrow is one that is alive with possibilities. It is one that centers our society's most vulnerable. It is a civil society sector that is led by young people. And lastly, it is a civil society sector that makes solving the world's most complex, challenging, and intersectional issues just a little bit easier for those that are brave enough to tackle them head on. Thank you.